Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Bob Mackin, award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.News, which you can find online at TheBreaker.ca. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
People voting for mayor in Vancouver are going to see one of their most crowded ballots ever. Can you make anything out of what's looking like almost, 10, 12 candidates?
Well, it's starting to rationalize a little bit. We did have the NPA choose among 3 people who are running for the NPA nomination. That came to a head finally on Sunday when Ken Sim, who's a franchise entrepreneur, he's one of 2 people behind the Nurse Next Door company, and he's also involved with a more recent startup, the Rosemary Rock Salt Bagel Company. He beat John Cooper, who is a veteran park board commissioner, as well as Glenn Chernin, who is an accountability activist, for lack of a better word. There was a 3-way race. The NPA decided to settle it on one ballot with a plurality, not a majority. Ken Sim came close to reaching the 50% threshold, but didn't need to. He beat the other 2, had about 977 votes. Cooper had more than 600, and Chernin had almost 400. It was a 10-hour vote on a Sunday afternoon, and they actually didn't get to actual speeches from the candidates until almost 2 hours before the polls closed. They actually didn't have a leadership debate during this contest, a very surreal thing. That's normally what you do. That's what Vision Vancouver had in 2008, when Gregor Robertson was running for the nomination, which he eventually got, over Raymond Louie, who became a city councillor lieutenant to Robertson and Ellen DeGenova, who had left the NPA. They had, for Vision Vancouver in June 2008, a leadership debate, which helped the party gain public profile and also helped its members in their decision-making process for when they had to go vote on their leader, who eventually became mayor. The NPA did not do that, but the NPA did pick Ken Sim, who is an interesting candidate because if he wins, he'd be the first Asian Canadian mayor of the city of Vancouver. But of course, a lot can happen between now and October 20th when the vote is done. Ken Sim is backed by Chip Wilson from Lululemon fame and Peter Armstrong from Rocky Mountaineer tourist train fame. Peter Armstrong has been a backer of the NPA for a number of years, has really kept this right-of-center coalition alive here in Vancouver. And so he was backed by a couple of powerful individuals in the local business community. He was a latecomer to the race. He didn't jump in until mid-April with a couple of weeks left to sell enough party memberships to then create the voters. And so he really came up the middle out of nowhere, and now is someone who has to spend a lot of time in the next few months getting people to know who he is, because I think that is his biggest problem right now. He's pretty well spoken. He's got business credentials. Doesn't really have a policy platform yet, but he needs to get out into all the communities, east, west, central, northern parts of Vancouver, and get his face and name out there, meet a lot of people, because Vision Vancouver is going to have its nomination in June. Chief Ian Campbell from the Squamish Nation, he is a North Vancouver resident, and he's also on the board of a development company which is closely tied with the Aquilinis. That looks like a conflict of interest to me. I don't know if it would be to all the listeners, but it looks like it to me, because the Squamish Nation, along with Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh, are going to have some of the biggest development applications for the biggest pieces of land in Vancouver coming up in the next 4 years. And can someone who was integral in negotiating those deals and being the architect of those deals, then be sitting in the mayor's chair, he would have to recuse himself a lot. He'd have to be away from the city council chamber a lot. He would know too many of the players. It would be too close for comfort. Is that the best person for the mayor's chair? Ian Campbell certainly is someone who has been a politician among the Squamish Nation on their chiefs and council for a number of years and has been to a lot of public events, and he certainly does sound and look like a politician, but he looks like he may not have any competition for the Vision Vancouver nomination because Talib Nur Mohammed quit the race for health reasons. He said he had a cardiac health incident, and that forced him to leave. There's someone who has run for the federal Liberals before in North Vancouver. He's been active in federal Liberal politics for quite a number of years. Very well-spoken individual, very well-educated individual, although he had some questions that people like me were going to ask about his more recent work with a company called the Stewart Group, which is a consultancy that lobbies on behalf of very large transportation infrastructure companies, the Bombardiers and SNC Lavalins, for instance, to get them contracts to build subways and LRTs in Canada. And it's also a company that advertises its services to help put those deals together. So he was more recently working with them, and of course here in Vancouver, TransLink and the mayors are going to come together later this month to probably rubber stamp the $2.83 billion Broadway subway. It's going to be a very large infrastructure project, and would that have been a problem for someone to be running for mayor, to be so close to a company which works behind the scenes to make these big infrastructure deals happen? But Talib Nur Mohammed is out of the race, sadly for him, because of health reasons, so that question is no longer a live question. The big wild card, of course, is Hector Bremner, who is on his way to leaving the NPA. He hasn't officially left the NPA yet, but he had a meeting last night with his supporters, and they've got a plan to, by the last week of June, announce a name of a new party, a board for a new party, some of the policies, the logo, the website. He has essentially cut ties with the NPA because the NPA didn't want him to be running for the nomination. He claimed to have sold 2,000 memberships. He had quite an organization behind him with a lot of experience running campaigns. Mark Marison, ex-husband of the former Premier Christy Clark, a veteran of Liberal campaigns and a veteran of the NPA campaign in 2005 when Clark was running for the nomination against Sam Sullivan. She lost to Sullivan, and there went a lot of the federal Liberals who were part of her campaign. They eventually found their way into the Vision Vancouver coalition and helped Vision Vancouver get so many years of power. Well, could lightning strike twice? If Hector Bremner does go forward with this new party, with Mark Marison in his back room, could he take a lot of younger voters, younger politically active people, especially in the federal Liberal wing of things, and some ex-BC Liberals? Could he ride that into City Hall? Could that further split the right-wing vote, for instance? Because you also have a situation with Y. Young, the former Conservative MP in Vancouver South, who wants to run for mayor. And, she's been kind of playing her cards close to her chest. We don't exactly know how serious she is on that and who her backers would be. And then, of course, on the left wing of the political spectrum, the Vancouver District Labour Council has hammered an agreement, which is just waiting for rubber stamping by all the left-wing parties. Vision Vancouver, One City, the Greens, and COPE to divvy up a number of spots or slots on the ballot. Vision is not going to run a full slate. Vision no longer has the support or the volunteers or the funding to run an entire slate like it used to. It's probably going to run 4 or 5 for city council, similar to smaller degrees of the other parties, including the Greens. So the left seems to be getting its act in order, but now the right seems to be a little bit fractured, and you wonder what's going to happen going forward in the next several weeks will there be any attempt to try to bring Y. Young into the NPA fold, bring Hector Bremner back in, or at least some sort of agreement to not have a full slate of whatever Hector Bremner's party is called, and maybe not have a full slate of the NPA. Maybe convince someone, in those spheres not to run for mayor against Ken Sim. What will happen on the right? Same thing with what will happen on the left, because you also still have Shauna Sylvester, the Visionista, who says she's running as an independent. You've got Kennedy Stewart, the NDP MP from Burnaby, who's running as an independent. I think there's going to be some more moves, more rationalization in the next several weeks. You'd have to think that these houses will try to get their houses in order before summer really starts, because this is going to be a different campaign. With an October 20th election day, that's almost a month sooner than we're used to. That means that the parties will have to hit the ground running at Labor Day, but the smart parties, the smart candidates, will be out there during the entire summer doing whatever they can on the barbecue circuit, on the community parade circuit, festival circuit, just getting their names and faces out there, finding volunteers and finding people to donate the smaller money, because they can't rely on corporations anymore. They can't rely on unions anymore. They can't rely on six-figure checks being written because of the $1,200 individual donation limit that was set by the NDP. So the smart parties are not going to waste any time, and they're not going to look at Labor Day as the start. They're going to get started now.
Because it's so scattered, do you think the right and the left are going to have to try to find one candidate to concentrate on?
That's what I think is going to happen. That I don't think we're going to see Kennedy Stewart and Shauna Sylvester versus Ian Campbell, and you probably won't see Adrienne Carr from the Greens put her name forward for mayor. I think that there's going to have to be some rationalization on the left. That process is already underway. The Vancouver District Labour Council, I'm sure, because it's got this accord with all these left-wing parties, that it doesn't want to see them ruin the chance to try to keep the mayor's chair within that side of the political spectrum, and again, I think in the right side as well, because you've got a lot of people who were centrists who were on the Vision side for so many years, who saw a Vision really become too powerful and too greedy and too desensitized to the opinions of the public. You've got them going back towards the NPA and leaving Vision, especially at a time when you've got a left-wing government in Victoria with the Greens supporting the NDP. There is a usual dynamic. When you've got Victoria, the provincial government, going left, you see the civic government in Vancouver go right. We've seen for so many years under the BC Liberals that City of Vancouver took a bit of a left-wing turn, but you still had at the very center of Vision Vancouver a lot of center moderate Liberals. Those people are slowly making their way back to the NPA. Some of them are taking a second look and thinking, well, maybe they'll follow Hector Bremner wherever he goes. I think there's got to be some rationalization. There still is early days, and it's not until September 14th or so that the nominations are due. So you do still have some time, but because of the new order, the new way things are, that none of these parties are going to be able to afford the big advertising campaigns anymore. And if you've got parties which are so in flux and candidates who are all over the place, like we're seeing, and you don't have a real solid slate developing yet, then why would someone who is interested in the process want to suddenly throw all their time as a volunteer at someone who may not run or may not have the wider support to run? Why would someone who's got some money burning in their pocket to make a donation want to make a donation right now? I think that these parties have to get organized really quickly and start talks amongst each other to try to figure out who really should be running. Otherwise, we could be in a situation in City of Vancouver where there could be enough vote splitting and enough confusion for voters that whoever does end up in the mayor's chair and whoever might end up having a majority of votes on city council might be elected by a very, very thin, narrow piece of the demographic pie of Vancouver, that you could see someone running City of Vancouver with 100% of the power for the next 4 years who may have 20% or less support of the populace, and that's not healthy in a democracy when you've got so many people opposing whoever might become the power broker in City Hall after October 20th.
Well, it could almost be a quick picture for people thinking about proportional representation, because here you have so many votes being split in so many different directions. What kind of power base would the government have?
That's an interesting dynamic. On the provincial scene, you've got the NDP and the Greens pushing forward their referendum later this fall. Finally, there's a question and some scenarios for voters to chew on when the vote by mail happens this October and November. Whereas you have in City of Vancouver, the pieces are coming together or coming apart, depending on how you're looking at it, naturally. This is an evolution, and maybe this is also reflecting what really has happened in so many other countries in the world and so many other contexts in the world. We live in a world with, we used to talk about the 500-channel universe. Now we've got the internet. Now we've got, you can find a media that suits your purposes and your needs and your language, for your age group, for your interests, and because of fragmentation. There is fragmentation everywhere. There's business, there's culture, there's media. This is the age of narrowcasting, not broadcasting. This is the age when you can choose anything you want. You can go and there's dozens of types of beer, dozens of types of wine at restaurants these days. There's different kinds of stores you can go to for your taste. It's gotten to a point where in this world now, because of the way laws have changed and because science has changed, you can even choose your sex. There's so much choice out there, but there isn't the choice politically yet. In British Columbia, we really just have a duopoly. We've got the Free Enterprise Party, and then the party that is for labor and the left wing. We've got established parties federally. In the United States, you really still have the Democrats and Republicans. It's almost like politics and government is the last bastion that has not been affected by fragmentation. And I think what we're seeing in City of Vancouver naturally, and we're seeing on the provincial side, which is more artificially because it's being spurred on by the NDP and the Greens, I think we're starting to see that the public is going to get the choice it wants and it needs. If we look at what's happened in the United States, there's a lot of people unhappy with how the Donald Trump presidency has worked out, and there's a lot of people very unhappy with the Democratic Party with the fact that chose Hillary Clinton to run against Donald Trump. And I think that there's going to be a paradigm shift in the United States, but I think it'll take longer than what we're seeing here in Vancouver. People want more choice, and you can see what's happening in the BC Liberals and the NDP. Their old guard are reacting against this move to end the duopoly, and I think maybe the City of Vancouver election system, what we're seeing right now is almost like the Petri dish. We're watching it evolve on a daily basis, and we won't see the results until October 20th of how things actually do start to coalesce.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. Powerband Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, former Premier Christy Clark has found herself a new job working for a law firm that lobbies internationally. Is that a good place for her? And was she really auditioning for the job when she was still Premier with all of her foreign trips?
That's a good question. She's gone to work as an advisor to the Bennett Jones law firm. This is an interesting law firm because of some of the work that it does on big deals, on infrastructure deals, and some of the people that are involved there as well. A woman named Jane Bird, who came to the government. She was involved in in previous iterations of major infrastructure, transit infrastructure in Vancouver. She was involved in a major dam in BC. She was picked by Gordon Campbell to go and help renovate the High Commission in London before she came back to British Columbia. She is a lawyer, but also someone who's deeply involved in consulting and negotiating on major infrastructure deals. And of course, we've got major infrastructure deals happening right now in front of our eyes. The Surrey LRT, the Broadway subway. There's LNG plants that are happening. Site C is continuing. The Kinder Morgan pipeline is now the Kinder Morneau pipeline. The Trans Mountain pipeline is the Trudeau Mountain pipeline. The federal government wants to push ahead with that, even though there still is strong resistance from groups that are against that, and for environmental reasons, and now some that are even getting together for fiscal reasons. They don't want their tax dollars put into private companies' hands. So you've got major infrastructure, construction and real estate law firm is where Christy Clark now is hanging her hat. Guinness Tower, interestingly enough, where there also is the BC opposition office. And funny enough, she's across the street from the Shaw Tower, which is where Jim Pattison's headquarters are, where Glenn Clark is Jim Pattison's right-hand man. So you got the two Clarks who were very controversial premiers on different sides of the political spectrum, both resigned for different reasons from the premiership, are now in offices across the street from each other, doing different things, doing different jobs. What Christy Clark's job is, however, is an interesting one because you've seen more former politicians go this direction in recent years. It's not quite a lobbying job, but in some ways it is helping lobbyists do their jobs. You've got John Chrétien working for Denton's. Stephen Harper is also involved in that same law firm. James Moore as well. You've seen Stockwell Day work for a law firm. John Reynolds work for a law firm as basically an advisor, so that this is another service that the clients of that law firm can draw upon, or that clients can go directly to the former politician and draw upon them. This is a major loophole that has been left, because with the rise of regulations federally on lobbying, this kind of opened up. And here we're seeing more regulations on lobbying provincially, which gives an opportunity for an ex-politician to basically go into a law firm and become this human Rolodex who can help clients of that law firm know who to call and how to approach people who are still left on the inside of the government that the politician recently left. What the law firm and their clients are really buying from someone like Christy Clark is institutional knowledge. That Clark was inside cabinet, and for so many years as premier, 6 years as premier, but also many, many more years since the 1990s, both in opposition and as a cabinet minister in the Campbell government. So there would be a great deal of institutional knowledge of how things work inside government that someone like that could help a client better understand. And instead of just going out and hiring a lobbyist, they could always go and consult someone like that first. And if the discussions hypothetically are done in the context of a solicitor-client privilege relationship, then that would also be secret. And we may not ever know what is going on in the office of Christy Clark, the senior advisor to Bennett Jones. Definitely a lucrative job for her, and definitely something which will allow her to try to resurrect her brand, which was really damaged with the very poor campaign in 2017, and that very poor campaign in 2017 was the product of many years of decline and decay in the government that she ran through so many different scandals that shone a light on the BC Liberals and caused a lot of people to change their votes, to either vote Green or hold their nose and vote NDP in the 2017 election, which eventually led to her downfall. We'll see what else she might want to do with that job. If she'll use it as a springboard to something else, because there's always been these rumors that she might want to try the federal arena, whether as a conservative in the suburbs or someone who might want to run in an urban riding for the federal Liberals. We'll see if this is something that she's going to do temporarily, or if this could be more of a long-term gig.
Is there any word on what Diane Watts is up to?
No, it's been very, very quiet there. Very, very quiet, but there has been some word from the Fraser Valley about another politician looking at his future. There was word from one of my sources in Surrey that Rich Coleman was polling his name in Surrey and Langley for to basically test the waters, dip a toe in the water to find out if there would be any interest in Rich Coleman running for the mayoralty in Surrey or Langley, as well as Rich Coleman perhaps running as a conservative in the next federal election in one of the Surrey ridings. So there was some, from one of my sources, some question about whether the recently wrapped up legislative session in Victoria may have been the last for Rich Coleman, who had been part of the Liberal government from 2001 to 2017 in some very high-profile, intense cabinet portfolios, doing a lot of work in resources, BC Hydro, the booze and the gambling files. A lot of controversy and, of course, housing swirled around Rich Coleman. And now he's an opposition politician, and without portfolio with the BC Liberals. We only heard of him a few times during the legislative session, get up in question period to challenge the NDP. Here's someone who's had to rededicate himself to running a riding office and listening to constituents, and he hasn't been as busy as he used to be. And so maybe he's looking for something else. That's what a source was telling me. So maybe we'll see Rich Coleman do something before Diane Watts. We're still waiting to see things shake out in Surrey, which of the Mayor Linda Hepner lieutenants might want to run in the fall election to replace her, because she's not running again. So as much as we're looking at the city of Vancouver and seeing what goes on here and who finally gets onto the ballot this fall, we can't ignore what's happening in Surrey, because again, the next 4 years in Surrey will be as important as the next 4 years in Vancouver.
Yeah, and in that next 4 years, will Surrey become BC's largest city?
I don't know if it'll happen that quickly, but there are all kinds of forecasts that Surrey will eventually overtake Vancouver. Part of the reason is that there's so much more land in Surrey to do what needs to be done in Surrey, and perhaps even more opportunities for building skyscrapers in Surrey Central Business District. You can't build too much more in the downtown peninsula of Vancouver unless they're going to replace West End apartment buildings with skyscrapers, and I know there's some developers with those visions. And of course, you don't have as much congestion in Surrey as you do in Vancouver. A lot more opportunities in Surrey to do a lot of things, and I think with the affordability crisis in City of Vancouver, I think you get a lot of people starting to look more at Surrey as a serious place to do business, a serious place to go and live, and also for recreation. So Surrey definitely has the potential, and Surrey also demands more media attention. It's as the second biggest city in the region, it really does fly under the radar. We only really hear about Surrey when there's a problem, when there's a crime, for instance. We don't hear much about the other parts of Surrey, the business opportunities of Surrey like we need. But then again, we are in a new media landscape where there is less media.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic Engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, is there a reason why people riding on the Evergreen SkyTrain line should be looking up?
Yeah, looking up. Looking sideways as well, and also looking to their politicians to make sure that the politicians are overseeing the bureaucrats and the contractors, because I found out and reported this on the Breaker.news that the concrete inside the Evergreen Line tunnel is flawed. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of the segments that make up the tunnel rings, basically the concrete walls, that were installed when the tunnel boring machine created the tunnel. It also installed the cement walls, and some of the cement or concrete in the tunnel was over cured. There is a process. It's a little more complicated than baking a loaf of bread, but they basically have to, when they do the mix of the concrete, they also have to cure it. They have to bring it to a certain temperature. And 60 degrees Celsius was supposed to be the curing level, the maximum curing level, but there were segments installed in the tunnel that were over 70 Celsius, were over 80 Celsius. And because of that, there are worries that with moisture being introduced, that there could be cracking and chipping of the segments. Now, this was caught during the construction phase, and it caused a lot of problems behind the scenes, and it was kept secret by the BC Liberals for so long because they didn't want this question to be asked as they're running for election in 2017. I eventually did get the documents that showed what was going on there. The government had to hire extra experts to look at the problem, and one of them said it shouldn't be a problem for some of these that were installed that were cured at 70 Celsius, but the government demanded and got from SNC Laval an extension for the affected segments beyond the 2-year warranty. The affected segments will have a 10-year warranty and they'll be subject to annual inspections and maintenance if need be. They decided not to go ahead and replace them. They said it wasn't that urgent, but they did say it was urgent that they do get extra special attention, reporting and monitoring every year to make sure that cracking isn't beginning, because it doesn't take much to cause a problem in a tunnel. There were hundreds, as much as there were dozens and dozens of these segments that were installed, there were hundreds and hundreds of the segments that were rejected. So we don't exactly know the full cost, the full dollar value of how much this problem was caused, but this is something that shouldn't have happened. And again, it turns the spotlight back onto the BC government for doing this deal with SNC Laval to build this project, which was supposed to originally be an LRT project. There wasn't supposed to be a tunnel to this magnitude. There was a scenario where there was going to be a tunnel for LRT, but a tunnel for the SkyTrain project was slightly different from a tunnel for the LRT project, and less tunneling was going to be needed as well. And in fact, one scenario they had for a different route, there wasn't going to need to be a tunnel, but it changed from an LRT to a SkyTrain. The tunnel was started, and in 2014 there were all sorts of problems with the construction site. WorkSafe BC had to be called in. There were worker injuries, major concussion by one worker. There were problems with the ventilation. And of course, there were the famous problems with the tunneling, which caused so many sinkholes in that part of Coquitlam and Port Moody, and then delayed the finishing of the project and the opening of the project. This was the most difficult rapid transit project that had been done in British Columbia since BC became a rapid transit province in 1986 with SkyTrain and the Expo line. And here we are, later this month. The mayors of Metro Vancouver and the directors of the TransLink board are going to get together at the TransLink office and are going to probably rubber stamp. They're probably going to rubber stamp the Broadway subway, which is going to be, like the Evergreen line, a bored tunnel, and it's going to be through some geology that is challenging. And there is a margin for error. So some of the same problems that we saw on the Evergreen line could happen again on the Broadway subway. Some of the same people are involved from the TransLink side and the provincial government side. They haven't yet chosen a contractor. That'll take many, many months. But you can bet your bottom dollar that one of the bidders will be SNC Laval, who have had a hand in every phase of SkyTrain from the very beginning. So, fasten your seatbelts. There could be some adventures in the Broadway subway.
Well, thanks to SNC Laval, Canada went on the list of fraudulent countries because they had so many cooked deals in Quebec. Well,
there was a recent settlement. The shareholders of SNC Laval got together in a class action lawsuit for more than $1 billion, but had to settle for around $100 million. Trudeau has been more conciliatory and doesn't want to scare investors away and doesn't really want to shut the company down, but wants to get them to admit to some of their misdeeds. But there still are police investigations and court cases that are in the works. And I've not been satisfied as a reporter whenever I've asked the BC government, the BC Liberals, when they were in government, about why they were continuing to do business with SNC Laval and what due diligence did they do to make sure that the taxpayers were protected. Did they hire anyone to ask SNC Laval extra questions, do extra audits, to make sure that the people who were the bad apples on other SNC Laval projects around the world, and including Quebec, did they do anything to make sure that those people were not touching any BC projects whatsoever? And whenever I asked those questions, I never got answers. I never was satisfied with the BC Liberal government and the answers that they gave, or mostly non-answers, about what they were doing, if anything, to protect BC taxpayers and the investments that were being made and the contracts and the relationships with SNC Laval. SNC Laval is a company which has done business with BC Ferries. It's working on Site C. Of course, it's been heavily involved with projects like the Sea to Sky Highway and with SkyTrain projects. And it's the company that actually runs the Canada Line. It's running the Canada Line on the P3. And we don't know. We don't know if British Columbians were taken for a ride, and we don't know it. One thing that did happen when Christy Clark came to power in 2011 was one of the key people on her transition team was Gwyn Morgan, who at the time was chair of SNC Laval. He eventually resigned as chair, or retired as chair of SNC Laval. But the peak or the valley, depending on your perspective, of the SNC Laval era of corruption happened under the watch of a board that was chaired by Gwyn Morgan, who had a very close relationship as an advisor to Christy Clark, and eventually, after Clark was named premier by her party, SNC Laval got the John Hart Generating Station project, dam project in Campbell River, and of course it got the Evergreen line contract, and of course Site C was pushed forward, and SNC Laval is a key part of that. So, if there ever was an anti-corruption commission in BC like there was in Quebec, then these questions would have to be asked, and whoever would run it would have to bring in these people for questioning to ask them, were these deals done properly, and how much extra did it cost taxpayers? But of course, with the NDP in power right now, the NDP plowing forward in a lot of other infrastructure projects, I don't hold out that much hope, even though there is a segment of the NDP, the Coquitlam-Burke Mountain Riding Association last year went to the NDP convention, and a resolution was passed that there should be a Quebec-style anti-corruption investigation here in British Columbia to look at public works, to look at private companies being involved in major infrastructure here in BC, because we always hear those politicians and that cliche, on time, on budget, when in fact rarely are these big projects on time or on budget. And the big question is, could we have more? If money was spent more wisely and more transparently, could we have more, and could we have better, and could it cost less?
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin. He's also the publisher of thebreaker.news, online at thebreaker.ca. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. And don't forget, we also have a financial version of the show, This Week in Money, that happens every weekend on HowStreet.com radio. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.